welcome to our Facebook Live. Today we're going to be talking about student loans and COVID. So I'm just going to give it a few minutes to let people log on, to jump onto the call. I know we haven't been live in a little bit, so I know it's a little bit off routine to look out for our live posts, but we definitely wanted to talk today because there's been a lot going on. There's been a lot about student loans. There's been a lot about student loan repayment, how to handle that. And then I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions about what to do, how to manage your student loans, what you should be preparing for, and all that sort of information, because there's a lot going on right now. So I just want to give it a second to let people kind of jump on. And also, always we have these set up for everyone to watch later. Oh, and I'm just getting a note now. So everyone on YouTube, hello, we are on YouTube for the first time. I just need to fix something with our Facebook stream. So just 1 second, please. Let me just finish that up. The Facebook stream isn't working quite yet, so just one moment. Let's get in here, then we can jump in. You know, in all honesty, it's been a long time since we've done a live, and I feel like every time we have a live, we always have a minor technical thing going on, and today we actually are going to start doing lives on YouTube. This is our very first YouTube live, so we also want to keep it on Facebook as well. So we just want it easy for everyone to find it and everyone to be able to use it. So just 1 second. Let me just put in a little, since it didn't seem like the audio was working over there. So 1 second. Let me just get that set up. Kind of hard to do with one hand, but that's okay. We'll get there and we'll get all set up. All right, I think that's going to fix our issue with Facebook. So thank you for your patience, everyone. Hello and welcome on Facebook to our Facebook Live today. It's actually going to be an Ask the Edvisor live session. I'm your advisor, Elaine Rubin. And apologies, Facebook, for being a little delayed, little technical glitch there. We actually are also running this live through YouTube Live. So you can follow up or catch up on anything on both our YouTube page, see other videos covering different topics that are all about paying for college, repaying your student loans, as well as, you know, catching up on some of these lives. So we are running this Ask the Edvisor live session both on YouTube and Facebook today. So thank you guys for joining in. The way this works, I am more than happy to take questions. I'm more than happy to help you guys out, give some tips, share some advice, give a little bit of an update of what's going on with student loans. There's quite a bit going on right now. It all started back in March with any ed-owned loan, so a federally held federal student loan, actually had a 0% interest rate and the ability to postpone payments. And we've seen that change quite a bit on the days that you would actually be running. The ability to postpone your payments. We had it through May, September, end of the year, and now it was extended finally with the Secretary of Education to cover the end of this administration and head into the new administration. So there is a lot going on. So because of that, I am more than happy to take your questions as they come up. Feel free to put them in the chat. If you see me poking up, I'm looking both on YouTube and Facebook to make sure I'm not missing any questions. I do have a little bit of a delay. So if you don't hear me answering your question right away, that's probably why. So now that we got over a little bit of our technical difficulties, let's jump in. I see you guys joining now. Thank you so much for joining us today. And once again, I'm totally okay with taking a break and answering questions you guys have. Anything I say, feel free to get more clarification if you need it. So it all started in March, right? We had the president come out and say that he wanted to offer some relief for student loans. Over time, we realized that's going to be federally held loans, so mainly direct loans. Some FFEL loans, which is a little bit of an older program, were given the 0% interest rate. And then we saw the administrative forbearance come into play as well, where loans have been able to be postponed, those eligible federal student loans, now through the end of January. So February is coming. So a little bit about that. There's a lot of talk all around. We know that it's only ed-owned loans. There's borrowers out there who have federal student loans that aren't owned by the U.S. Department of Education. Loans maybe in that older program, that FFEL program that we touched on, maybe some of those federal Perkins loans. There's just some loans that aren't going to be qualifying for that, as well as private student loans. So we thought this was a great opportunity to jump on and just have a conversation. I'll go over some things, some information about it, preparing for repayment, talk about a little bit of what's been going on in the media in regards to things like student loan forgiveness, continuation or extensions of these types of forbearance and that sort of thing, and just share some tips. So this session, we love having Facebook Lives and YouTube Lives now because it's a great opportunity to help our audience, people who follow us on our social accounts, who get information from our sites, edvisors.com, and scholarship points as well, because we've also been sharing this with our scholarship points audience on Instagram. This is your opportunity to ask any questions you may have. I'm keeping an eye out, so if you see me looking up over here, I'm just making sure I'm not missing anything. It's a little hard for me to read it from the phone. So when we talk about student loans right now, this is quite the unique time. We've heard it a million times. Things aren't how they have been, right? Things just are not the way they've been. We've actually seen several loans be eligible for that 0% interest rate and loan postponement. Right now, that's set to expire in January. And, that was actually a great help, I think. The Secretary of Education did that a few weeks ago to cover any gap between the end of the year and the new administration. So those loans are kind of, in that holding pattern for now. If you don't have a loan that was eligible for those types of relief, that type of relief, it's time, to keep an eye out and have conversations with your servicer or with your lender to see if you need any additional relief. We've seen it a lot. Federal student loans that don't qualify for the same type of relief, they've actually been extended some assistance through their lenders and their programs, but a lot of times you have to take that action to have that happen. Have it be a loan postponement, some type of forbearance, some type of deferment, and action does need to be taken. And I do see some questions coming in. Thank you, Anita. Oh, thank you, Anita, for joining us, and thank you everyone who's been joining us so far. What if I need more time past the end of January? Okay, that is a question we're getting a lot. A lot of people are concerned with timing. One of the reasons this relief was offered is the state of the world right now. We're in a global pandemic. A lot of people have had negative consequences from COVID-19 and a lot of financial consequences because of COVID-19. If you need assistance past January, the best thing you could do is to call your servicer and have that conversation. Do you have to wait until February to have that conversation? You absolutely do not need to wait. You actually have an opportunity now to contact your lender, contact your servicer, and talk about the options they have. If you're in an income-driven repayment plan, or maybe you're not in an income-driven repayment plan, which is essentially a repayment plan that allows you to base your payments on your income and not your loan balance, you have that's a completely different way to repay your loan, right? Many other types of debt base your payments on the total amount of debt you have. an income-driven repayment plan could be a great option for you. If you're not in one, if you're in one, you also have the opportunity to ask for a recalculation of that monthly payment based on your current income. So that could be a great way to help you come the end of January. If nothing else has been extended, no other types of relief are being offered, that could be an option. And finally, the option you have is to call your servicer. If you're already doing all that, or maybe for some reason you don't want to go into an income-driven repayment plan, you can ask to see if there's any options for you to postpone your loans even further with either a forbearance option or a deferment option. And your loan servicer is the one who can help you understand what your options are there. So if your loan does re-enter repayment in February and you're not quite ready, there are some actions you can take. And you don't need to wait till the last minute to do it. You can start having these conversations now. If you have these conversations now, it'll help that crunch time. It's going to be super busy for servicers when it comes to the point where all these loans are re-entering repayment. So the sooner you can get started and get an idea of what your options are, the better. A lot of servicer portals will give you this information as well. And you can always make a phone call to have an in-person phone not in-person, but a phone conversation with your servicer. All right. So great question, Anita. And now we have another question from Talia. Any changes to loan forgiveness based on total and permanent disability? So that program hasn't been touched. So total and permanent disability is the ability to have a discharge if you meet the criteria of being totally and permanently disabled. What's going on right now hasn't had an impact on that. You can still complete your necessary forms that you can find online, and I'll put a link to that so you have an easy way to find that, and essentially work with the servicer to help you through that total and permanent disability process. But nothing's really been affected with that particular program. You still have the ability to apply and go through the process you need to qualify for that discharge option. It still needs to, there's certification forms and other pieces of that application. That's a great question. Thank you, Talia, for having that. And for those of you who are joining us as we're kind of going along here, feel free to ask questions in the chat. I'm keeping an eye on it. I've got some great people on my team also keeping an eye on it and flagging anything from me. We do know Facebook has a little bit of a delay. So if you don't see me answering right away, it's probably just that delay. And as soon as it pops up, I'll get right to it. So great questions from Anita and Talia so far. I'm going to go through just some tips, and as questions come in, we'll stop and go from there. So thank you guys so much. All right. So we were talking, and Anita had a good point of, these types of relief options are offered until the end of January. So that means as of right now, any loan that was eligible for that will be entering repayment. And the other thing we need to keep in mind with some of this stuff is these relief options are temporary. They will go away at some point, most likely. Now, there's a lot of talk of things like student loan forgiveness. Where does that kind of fall into things? We'll kind of get to that a little bit later, but in all honesty, when it comes to repaying your loans, it's best to prepare and get yourself where you need to be. So we talked about some issues of, what if I can't pay my loan come February? What if I need more help? There's definitely an opportunity to talk to your loan servicer. And once again, that income-driven repayment plan, that's an option where you have the ability to base your repayment on your income and not your total debt. So people who are already, that's hard to say, are already enrolled in that have the opportunity to, continue repaying in that. And if something has happened to you negatively financially, there has been a change of income, your financial situation, you actually have the ability to ask for a recalculation of your monthly payment. So keep that in mind. That's something you kind of want to keep an eye on as we get closer to when your loans enter repayment. Now we do have a little bit of time, but that time will fly by. So it's a good idea to keep your eye on what's going on and what your options are from that point. If you were in that income-driven repayment plan as well, it's always a good idea to keep an eye on your recertification date. One of the requirements of that plan, if you've been in one, is that you need to annually recertify your income. So if that has happened, your recertification date has come and you haven't recertified yet because of everything going on, you want to make sure you get that through. You want to make sure you get through that process of recertifying that annual recertification requirement to keep you back on track for repayment come February. So that's a good thing to keep an eye out if you are already on one of those income-driven repayment plans. If you weren't on one of those income-driven repayment plans and you are a little bit concerned about what you can do, you can also look into switching into one of those income-driven repayment plans. So if you were on a standard plan, if you have a graduated plan or an extended plan, those are things you can keep your eye on to see if you can qualify for them, or potentially ask if you can further postpone your loan payments. So that's a great thing to keep an eye on with that. Now, I always like, if I'm in a room, I always like to ask and see a show of hands or have questions that are a little more interactive. So Facebook and YouTube aren't that easy. So you guys feel free to like or put any sort of reactions on here just so I get an idea of who I am talking to and if some of the stuff is relevant to you and I can keep going. And that's a great way for me to kind of gauge. And also, let those questions come in. Feel free to ask any question you have on this. If you're not comfortable asking a question on the chat, I know sometimes this can be quite the topic. It's not the topic everybody likes to share with everybody else. Feel free to send us a direct message. If we see it and I can respond to it, I'll respond to it here. And I won't be sharing your name or anything. I do not tie names to anybody who wants to ask a question, but maybe they don't want to do it in front of everyone. So that is totally fine as well. And if I don't get to your question on the Facebook Live or the YouTube Live, I'll be more than happy to answer it after. So, and thank you, Denisha, for that. Thank you for that note. Thank you for joining us today. So, all right. So for those of you who have been going through the pandemic, we're all affected financially or not, but those who maybe weren't affected financially, what should you do to prepare for repayment? Well, there's a few things you should do. One, if you've been able to continue your payments, even when you weren't required to pay them on your loans, that's fantastic. Hopefully you're seeing an impact on any outstanding interest you had, your principal balance is going down. Hopefully you're seeing some of those impacts now. One thing I would recommend for those of you who have been able to continue with those payments is keep that momentum up. Get a good idea of where you are now, not having interest accrue. That's a great opportunity to help pay down any outstanding debt you have there, right? So keep that momentum up. Do a reevaluation of where you are and where you want to be in the next few years. Get an idea of what options are available to you. Are you under the right repayment plan? Are you able to continue to afford making payments? Can you pay more? That sort of thing. And if you are looking for a way to lower your interest rate because you've already done a decent amount of work of paying down that debt, maybe consider something like a student loan refinance. Look if maybe you can find a way to reduce that interest rate. And I know some people are a little hesitant right now with the talks of forgiveness, but there is a little bit more when it comes to forgiveness that we'll get to in just a second. Because we have one question coming in from Javencia. Thank you so much for asking your question. Does repayment get your loans out of derogatory? So I'm assuming you mean derogatory is past due. So if you had a loan that was in a past due status, not necessarily default, but a past due status, so a delinquent type of status, it's most likely that your servicer went ahead and applied the administrative forbearance. And depending on the date and that sort of thing, you should be in good shape when you enter repayment again. You should be. But just keep an eye on that. And there have been a little bit of talks about when things re-enter repayment, that maybe it'll take a little bit to get there, because it's going to be basically like on the back end, not really too much in the front end, but in the back end, your servicers are going to be working to get everyone converted over. So just keep an eye on it, see how it goes. And if you have any questions of where your loan is, then you can always call your servicer, talk to your servicer about your status of your loan when you enter repayment and if it was correctly converted over. We have a question coming in again from Elisa. What's been the information of working in a nonprofit? And then Javette, okay, so just a quick follow-up on Javette said they are on a deferment. Oh, okay, if you are on a deferment, your loans were eligible for the relief, they should have been, placed in the relief option. So the relief option was the 0% interest and the administrative forbearance offered through that. You might want to double check with your loan servicer to make sure, because some things like deferments, if you were on different types of deferments, they might have a little bit of a time limit on there. So you want to make sure you were in the right status, but they should have been converted over to the relief option under the CARES Act and the ones that have been extended. However, with that being said, it had to be a loan that was eligible for that relief to begin with. That makes sense. There were some loans that weren't. Okay, Lisa, what's the information for working in a nonprofit organization or working as a counselor due to overdose pandemic? Okay, so if you have been working in a nonprofit organization, you probably are looking into public service loan forgiveness as a type of option to help forgive your loans. And just let me know if that's not what you meant by that. But if that's what you meant by that, of how does that affect my public service loan forgiveness? Or if you weren't working towards public service loan forgiveness in the past and now you are because you had a change of career, that's fantastic. But actually the way the relief was offered for these eligible loans, if you met the qualifications for public service loan forgiveness before this kind of all took place, and you kept your eligibility through it, through the end of January, all those payments will be counted as qualifying payments. One of the best things you can do if you are working towards public service loan forgiveness is complete one of the employment certification forms, also known as an ECF. The department also has put up a site to help complete those forms, but essentially what it does is it helps start tracking your qualifying payments, because you don't technically apply until you've completed 120 qualifying payments towards your forgiveness. So if you haven't been completing those employment certification forms, this is a great time to kind of work to get those done. They do need certification from your employer. So we always recommend, it's always kind of like an industry thing, or if you talk to a lot of people who work with student loan repayment, to get those employment certification forms done at least annually. Because that way, if you switch jobs or something happens, it's not easy to get a hold of your HR or your company after the fact, it'll be really hard to get that certified by your employer. If you were doing something for the pandemic that maybe you would be switching companies or switching agencies, then you do want to get those forms done before you leave or switch jobs to another company. The thing with public service loan forgiveness is you do not need to be working with the same employer the entire time, as long as they meet the qualifications for you. So great question there. All right, we do have a few more coming in. So great question, Elisa. Theo, why are they adding interest to my loans when they suspended loan payments? Okay, so here's what you need to do, Theo. You want to determine what type of student loans you have. So if you have federal student loans, I wish the answer was simple. I wish the answer was super simple, saying they all qualify. They do not. One thing you kind of learn with federal student aid and kind of working in this field is that there could be little pieces of information that change how things and how different rules apply. So when it comes to the relief, you want to double check that you have federally held loans or U.S. Department of Education owned loans, and that they're part of the federal student loan program. If you have a loan, maybe that's a little bit older, something that was dispersed before 2010, you could have a loan under the FELP program, which is known as the Federal Family Education Loan Program. And those are not all federally held. So you do have to double check to see what type of federal student loan you have. Now, a lot of the federal student loan lenders and servicers, regardless of who owns them, have been offering some types of relief. However, if it's not a Department of Education owned loan or a federally held loan, the 0% interest rate likely did not apply. So you want to get a good idea of what type of loan you actually have. And that way you can determine why interest is occurring. If you have a loan that should have met all the criteria and should fall under the relief, you can ask for that to be corrected and fixed. However, I'm thinking maybe it's not a federally held loan. And also keep in mind, private student loans don't qualify for the protections and the relief offered under the CARES Act. So that's just a thing to keep in mind. But great question. And Joey has another question. Can you get loan forgiveness working for a church? Joey, let me get back to you on that one. Let me put that in the chat and reply directly to that. There could be something there, so I just want to double check. So I will definitely get you the answer to that question. That's a great question. And when it comes to PSLF, I just want to be sure, because PSLF is one of those programs that has a lot of different qualifiers and a lot of different requirements that you have to meet that are on the employer, that are on your repayment plan, and that are on the type of loans you have. Theo, yes, it's a federal student loan. Okay, so then you're going to have to still figure out what type of federal student loan it is. It is not that cut and dry. It's not that easy to see all the time, because not all federal student loans qualify for the relief. It had to be a Department of Education owned loan. So you do want to double check with your servicer and see what type of loan you have, and ask them if it qualified for the relief offered under the CARES Act and now the further extensions offered by the President and the Secretary of Education. But that's a great question. And that was one of our top questions we got when a lot of information was coming in regards to the CARES Act, how it applied to loans, how it helped it through. The biggest question was, how do I even figure out what type of loan I have? And a lot of that is better answered if you do contact your servicer or log into a portal and get an idea of what type of loan you have. Any question you have in regards to your eligibility under the CARES Act is always good to double check with your servicer. And if it should have qualified, I'm sure there's something they can do to help fix that if it should have qualified. But great question. And no problem, Joey and Theo. I see your things come in. All right, we have a question from Ash. Can you get loan forgiveness being in the National Guard? All right, so when it comes to the National Guard, military branches do offer different types of loan repayment assistance and loan repayment options. When it comes to going through the actual federal student aid program, there aren't necessarily direct ties to that just specifically for the National Guard. It could potentially qualify for different types of things, but I would double check with the Army National Guard and ask them about their student loan forgiveness options that they have. A lot of military branches could offer it, and they can also offer it depending on where you work and what type of work you do. One things with the military as well, in regards to the Army as well, is there are certain types of forgiveness also extended to those in the medical field. So that's a great question. And I will put up some links to get you to a lot of the military branch information. The Department of Defense, I believe, is the one who runs the military site, and they have great information on there on a lot of benefits that are offered under the military branches to help you get an idea of who to contact and how to find that information. So that's a fantastic, fantastic question. So you guys are really coming up with some good good questions here. Okay, we have a question coming in from Gilbert. Sorry, I'm just pulling it up and kind of cut off. It seems to be, where you find 100 ways to forgive some or all part of your loans. Okay, so Gilbert, that is true. It is quite the process. Public service loan forgiveness is only one option offered under federal student aid in their loan programs. They also have a teacher loan forgiveness. And if you have a Perkins loans, there could be even additional options for your Perkins loan specifically. There are ways you can find ways to have your loan forgiven. You can look at employers, see what future employers or employers that you work with, if they offer any sort of student loan repayment assistance, any sort of benefit, any way to signing bonus towards it to kind of aim towards student loan forgiveness. So there definitely are a lot of ways you can work towards getting student loans, have someone help you repay your student loans. With the federal program, public service loan forgiveness is one of the more all-inclusive ones if you work in public service, but it is a little bit complicated. There have been people have had a little bit of trouble qualifying because there's so many pieces to it. You have to make sure you work for an eligible employer full time. You have to sorry, I just saw a chat come in and it caught my eye. You have to work in an eligible employer. You have to have the right type of loan. You have to be enrolled in a eligible repayment plan, and you have to make 120 qualifying payments all while you're doing it all. So it can be a little bit complicated to get there, but it definitely is an option out there. And some people are working towards it, but 120 payments of monthly payments will equal 10 years. So it does take a little bit of time to get there. So great point you have there, Gary. And let me see, we have another question come in from Denisha. Okay, so Denisha says, I'm a military spouse and I'm taking a self-paced certification course. Would that qualify for deferment of the loan? Okay, so when it comes to loan deferment, when you're enrolled in school, there actually is a little bit more to it. First of all, you have to be enrolled in a school that is able to offer an in-school deferment. I know that sounds a little interesting, but generally if they participate in federal student aid programs, meaning they offer student loans, they offer grants and that sort of thing under that program, then generally they qualify as far as being an eligible school. But then you have to be in a program that would make you be considered eligible for a deferment. So generally just taking a course or just taking kind of like one class is another way to kind of put that. Generally, that won't necessarily make you qualify for a deferment. A lot of deferments do require an enrollment status, an enrollment status requirement. So that's just something to keep in mind with that. But that's a great question. Financial aid in your financial aid office will let you know if the course you're enrolled in will allow you to defer any of your student loans. Chances are, if it's just one course, it might not be enough to qualify for that. But great question. Yeah, there is also a requirement. Denisha, I just saw your follow-up. If you don't technically have a student ID, chances are the school may not consider you as an enrolled student kind of there. And that's more of the technical background stuff that the school is using in regards to the federal student aid program, is if you're considered to be a regularly enrolled student. If you don't technically have a student ID, they probably don't have you in that status. But a great question to ask them. And then also another question you could ask them is there any way with this course, if you're looking to do any other type of education or taking on any other courses to get some sort of certificate or another degree, you can also ask them what it would take to get to that deferment status. But great question. All right, we do have, you guys have had a lot of great questions today. Thank you so much for joining. So feel free to keep asking those and have those come in. If you have any follow-ups to anyone who already asked questions, I'm more than happy to take them. Let's see. No problem, Denisha. So when we talk about student loan, and kind of to tie this together a little bit. So have your questions come in. I'm by no means signing off this second. I don't really even have an end time. As long as you guys are here and asking questions, I'm more than happy to stay. But I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're seeing in the media, what we're talking about in the media, and what's coming through. Because a lot of people, when it comes to student loan repayments, they want to know, should I be looking to aggressively repay my loans when they're talking about forgiveness? If they're talking about having additional benefits offered. So here's the thing, and this is what I would say. Until something is actually passed and it's final, it's been signed into law, or there's a date when it's going to happen and we know it's going to happen, until it gets to that final stage, I do recommend you guys staying on top of your loans. Once the temporary relief is lifted, we don't know when that's going to be. There's even been talks of extending it further with any sort of stimulus package and seeing what the new administration would do. They're still all talk. And unfortunately, when it comes down to it, you don't want to find yourself in a situation with your loans going delinquent and having anything negative happen to your credit. Student loans are reported to credit bureaus. You will be able to see your student loans, federal or private, on your credit history, your credit report, and your payments, if you're making them on time, if you're going delinquent. So I would hate it if anybody was hoping for forgiveness or any sort of issues and then have delinquencies and other negative reporting happen. So I always recommend to stay on top of it. For those who are really looking into forgiveness, we don't know if or when it's going to happen. Chances are it'll probably have to wait to the new administration, because that's just kind of like how it's looking right now. And once again, until it actually happens, until it actually gets here, we don't necessarily know if it's going to happen and when. So if it's going to take until the new administration, and then depending on how it would go through, and there's been a lot of talks about that, it's going to take a little bit of time. So we're not sure if the relief options will be extended until those decisions make. So if those decisions are made on forgiveness. So I would recommend to stay on top of your loans. If they are entering repayment, make sure to take those actions you need to take to set yourself up. Make sure, if you're unable to afford your payments, if you are concerned about getting back into a repayment status, have those conversations, learn your options with your loan servicer. And the great thing about loan servicers, when they're looking at your actual account and what you used in the past and that sort of thing, they can give you really personalized advice into what your options are. If you're someone who wants to aggressively continue repaying your student loans, and you want to find an efficient way to do it, a lot of people ask, well, can I reduce my interest rate? In all honesty, this 0% interest rate offered as part of CARES relief is one of the only times we've seen interest rates get reduced in the federal student loan program. If you look into consolidation in the federal student loan program, that actually is not going to reduce your interest rate. That's actually going to do a weighted average. So if you're someone who wants to find a way to efficiently repay your student loans, you might want to consider something like a refinance option. If you're holding out for forgiveness or you want to know more about if and when forgiveness could happen, there's a few things I think you should keep your ears open for while they're talking about this and while it's going through. And of course, once again, once it's final, then you'll know all the details. But there are some things you need to keep in mind. Theo had a great question today about loan type. Federal student loans, there's more than one type of federal student loan out there. And if CARES Act and the relief offered has shown us anything, is that it can be super targeted into what type of loans are offered relief based on any sort of law passed or any sort of executive order out there. So it's always good to kind of get an idea of what type of loan you have. When it comes to federal student loans, there are direct loans, there are FFEL loans, and there's also some Perkins loans, and they were not all treated the same this time around. So if there are any continuing talks about forgiveness, keep an eye on that to see what type of loans could potentially qualify for that. And also there's private student loans outside of the federal program as well, to keep an eye on that. And depending on how your loan makeup is, you could have some of each or just one type. So just get a good idea of what type of loans you have. Another thing to keep your eye on is the total amounts being offered in forgiveness. The numbers have been a range, and just get an idea of your current loan balance. How much do you currently owe? Who do you owe it to? And that sort of thing. Because based on the different talks out there, the amounts that they've been talking about for forgiveness have vastly differed. And they're constantly changing, it feels like. But once again, none of these things are final. So we don't necessarily know if they go with a forgiveness option, how much is actually going to be forgiven for everyone. And one final thing I would also keep an eye out. There's a lot of details in these, and more details could be more, sorry about that. More details could come up that are what you should be paying attention to. But other things that have come up recently in some of the proposed bills out there have also been income requirements or income limitations for those who would qualify for any type of forgiveness. So those are just some things to keep your ears out for. Just get a good idea of your situation right now, how much you owe, the different types of loans you owe, and that sort of thing. When we're talking about potential forgiveness out there. And once again, I can't stress it enough, that word potential forgiveness. One of the reasons for that is we've had a lot of talks about forgiveness in the last decade at least. So far, we haven't seen anything really on a flat scale that doesn't require things like public service loan forgiveness or working a certain type of field. So it's just a matter of figuring out if and when it happens and how it's going to be implemented. If you have both federal and private student loans, well, there could be a chance that all of it will qualify or none of it will qualify depending on your loan type. So those are just some things to keep an eye out on. Now, just for those, because I know people have been joining and jumping on here, if your loan didn't qualify for the relief under the CARES Act or any of the extensions, I do recommend that you contact your lender to see if you need it, any additional relief options are available for you. If not, you do have to ask about different ways you can get back into a good repayment status with them. If you do have federal student loans and they were Department of Education owned loans, then the relief has been extended to the end of January. But that doesn't mean, that your loans are never going to enter repayment again. We still don't know what's next. We're still waiting on the what's next. Will this type of relief be extended further, or will there be other legislation introduced and passed that can help with student loan repayment. So there are a lot of different factors out there that we're still waiting for. But we are definitely keeping our eyes on it. We are keeping up with the media, seeing what's happening, keeping up with Congress and the change in administration and everything coming with that. And we are gonna do our best to give you that information. Edvisors.com is our website, and there we have a blog that will be posting things there. Also there, we have the option for you guys to ask questions that we will help you with in Ask the Edvisor. So those questions right on the website, scroll down to the bottom of the page and you'll see Ask the Edvisor there, and you can actually submit a question through Ask the Edvisor. And we will get back to you to help you with any question you have or any problems, or give you some advice on next steps that you can take. So I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. Just as a reminder, my name is Elaine Rubin. I am the Senior Contributor and Communication Specialist here at Edvisors. If you guys want to get up-to-date information, make sure to subscribe both to our Facebook and our YouTube channel. Our YouTube, we're working to get a lot of great video content out there for you guys so that we can talk to you, so we can explain how different things work, how different programs kind of work, and have a conversation about it. And then, of course, we also have our website of edvisors.com. Any question that I didn't get to, I know I have a follow-up here. I think it was for Joey that we will get to, and I did promise some links, so we'll get those up in the next few hours once we get off live. And just feel free to check back so that you have that information to help you with your next steps. Thank you guys so much for joining today. We are looking to go live again in January. The conversation, the topic, we think we're going to focus a little bit more on those who are maybe starting school or are looking to pay for school. So that's going to be a little bit different because this was all about people in repayment. So maybe some of you guys can join us then if you guys are also paying for school or looking to go back to school in the next year or so. That would be a great time to join us. But also, we're going to be hosting Facebook and YouTube lives on a more regular basis because we love having conversations with you guys. I love your questions. All of them are absolutely fantastic. So thanks again, guys, and we will definitely see you next time. Thank you. Bye.